big headline from Norlander on Wednesday morning. The Players Era Festival, it's now official. It's going to be in Las Vegas later this year during the week of Thanksgiving, and it's going to be lucrative for the schools that are involved. We're talking about Alabama, Creighton, Houston, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, Texas A&M. Each of those schools is going to get $1 million of NIL money just for participating. Norlander, you handled the reporting on all of this. So what else do we need to know about this first of its kind season event that's happening later on this year?
Yeah, so a few things to dig into with this. We actually haven't talked this. I first reported on this like 5 weeks ago or so. But with the cadence of how the story rolled out, in addition to our podcast schedule, we actually haven't really talked about this on the show yet. So the official announcement that this was going to be happening came out on Wednesday, and we got a few additional details. But there's a couple of talking points to touch on with this. I'll get to the basics. I want your thoughts, and then we'll get to the skepticism that continues to exist over this event and its long-term viability, which I think are all very fair questions there. So GP gave you the 8 teams. It will be played the week of Thanksgiving this upcoming season. The plan as of now, I believe, is the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday of Thanksgiving. Those dates have not been finalized. In part, I was told because the broadcast partner, which has not been announced yet and is going to be on a streaming service, I don't know which one yet. Apparently there might be some desire to have basketball on Thanksgiving. I don't know. There was that, and then there was I think a hang up with the MGM Grand Arena, which is where most of the games will probably be played. The building was booked through another promoter for one of those days, so they still have to sort all that out. But it'll be happening the week of Thanksgiving. This is another huge basketball event scheduled for next season that will only increase the amount of college hoops the week of Thanksgiving, which obviously has huge basketball vibes in addition to all the football stuff that happens that week. The matchups that will start will be out of 2 4-team brackets because you'll notice there's Alabama and Texas A&M in this thing. There's 2 SEC teams. Current MTE rules for the NCAA do not allow for teams from the same conference to face each other in an MTE, barring extreme circumstances. And so you'll have Houston playing Alabama, which is a huge matchup right off the bat, and then Rutgers playing Notre Dame in one bracket. And then you will have Creighton versus Oregon. You'll recall those two played an amazing game in the tournament just this past season. And Texas A&M will play San Diego State. Those teams will play 2 games apiece in bracket play. And then the winners of those, the teams that go 2-0, everyone will play 3 games. But for the purposes of what we're talking about here and what matters most, which is the NIL money, that's $1 million. They will play a neutral site event that is technically not connected to the MTE. Although, again, people are like, they're gonna let the NCAA is gonna let them do this. Apparently so, because compliance people have been scouring over this thing for months. And the winner of the championship game, if you will be given another $1 million in NIL earnings opportunities for the players. It is a mammoth event. It's 8 teams this season. They are planning to bloat this thing to at least 18, if not more, starting in 2025. The press release that came out on Wednesday purported a 5-year plan to play this in Las Vegas. 7 of the 8 teams we mentioned before are signed on for 3 years. Everyone except Oregon, which is currently committed to the Maui Invitational in 2025. But Houston, Rutgers, Creighton, A&M, Bama, all those, they're all committed to playing this thing for 3 years. Other teams that were formally announced to be playing on Wednesday that I had previously reported were Gonzaga, Michigan, Syracuse. New teams to the field were St. John's and St. Joe's. They're already in. Now, I think Duke is flirting with doing this, more than flirting. Kansas as well, and then Virginia. Those are teams that have been previously in discussions to maybe eventually join this. None of them have formally agreed. I would express doubt that you'd get all 3 of them moving forward. And then there are other programs behind the scenes. I say other programs. The line for this thing it's dozens deep, as you might imagine there. So it's a huge event, first of its kind. It's got to clear quite a few barriers just to be NCAA compliant when it comes to this. Like the players are going to have to do certain things to meet the obligations to earn that money through NIL. So it's not, hey, you show up and play and then we pay you. You still that. Many of the rules in the NCAA have frayed, if not disintegrated. That has not been one. So there will be things that are tied to this event that the players will be mandated to do. There's even more, but I've given you kind of the basic details on it. What are your thoughts on the event, its viability, its intrigue? Will there be copycats? And we haven't really talked about it at all, but it is, I'll tell you this, GP, it has been a disruptor in the space, and understandably so, because you are taking a lot of big time programs and putting them into an event that until this year never existed. And so by nature of that, you are impacting the way the sport is scheduled through the first month of the season in substantial ways.
First, I'd say to all the players, do whatever you want to do. Don't do anything you don't want to do. If the NCAA has a problem, just sue them. You'll win. It is easy. All right. If the NCAA says something, just sue them, and you'll probably win. So do whatever you want to do. Obviously, this is new. It's interesting. It's easy to understand why schools would want to be involved in this. It's like $1 million injection into your NIL collective, for lack of a better term. But from the second this has first been reported, people read it and they go, okay, interesting. But how is this financially viable for the event organizers? Now, personally, I don't really care because I'm not an event organizer, so I don't care who's making money or who isn't. But from your reporting, when somebody says, how is this going to be a moneymaker for the people who are supposed to be trying to make money off of this thing, what's your understanding of how this is going to work?
Right. So this is the major question in college athletics right now. Even yesterday, when the story kind of got new life because it was officially announced, there are many people around college athletics that are downright cynical that this thing will actually go off as it is being promoted. There is allegedly, private equity money in a hedge fund named Redbird IMI, which is under a wing of Redbird Capital, that is worth billions of dollars. And Jeff Zucker, the former head of CNN, runs Redbird IMI. So I guess the baseline level assumption is that this will be funded in part by that, because think about it. You got to pay all these schools $1 million. And there'll be another $1 million for the champion. And you talk to anyone in the event space that does this stuff, and the idea that you would even be able to profit more than $1.5 million off of this is incredible. So between the gate that you'll get, right, the tickets, which these are decent matchups, it's a solid field, but it's Grand Garden Arena, I don't think is gonna sell out every single day of this thing. And even if it did, you wouldn't clear enough money to pay all these schools back. So between that and any kind of sponsorships or ad revenue, if the games are on a streaming service, the financial model there is different. So understandably so, like there are a lot of questions about, all right, when we actually get to the time to hold this thing, are these schools going to be paid what they should? Because another aspect of this, don't want to get too into the weeds on this stuff, but there have been a couple of like notable standalone games in the past 2 years where it was, Team A versus Team B at a neutral site, and a specially promoted game run by one of these independent third-party operators, right? And most of the time those games are they're well attended, but they're well organized, they're well run, the teams get paid. Oftentimes, like the Gonzaga Duke game a few years ago that was in Vegas, that I think both teams got paid like $400,000, $450,000 to play in that. Now it didn't go straight to NIL, but the teams got paid to do it. There have been instances lately, although these stories don't really get out publicly, where teams were either not paid full what they were told they would be paid, or just barely paid at all. And so because that has kind of been a thing that has surfaced, it only increases the skepticism around this event, and particularly the long-term viability. Because you talk about going from 8 teams, okay, can you scrounge up the 13, 14 million that might be necessary to make this happen and clear all the checks and all that, to going to 18 at least, 18 teams moving forward. Who is funding this? People are not, generally speaking, in the business of just giving away millions of dollars without the promise of having a return on investment there. So it is a major part of this story. And the fact that we have gotten to mid-June, they made the announcement, but we don't have, what they stopped short of was the dates. I'm told the MGM Grand Arena is where they're going to play the games, but that technically hasn't been announced. And there might be a little bit of T-Mobile in there with that. And the broadcast partner, whichever one it might be, whatever streaming service it might be, that is still giving people a lot of pause over this. But these teams are on it. I've been told by a number of teams that have, they have compliance people and associate ADs who look deep into this, that have vetted the whole thing. Hey, they're on board. I'm kind of with you. Hey, this is a fascinating event. If it is successful, I think there's a chance we could have copycat events that are that won't have as big of fields, that won't have as much money, but you are giving schools and teams an opportunity to be given all this NIL money, and it's just less money they have to go and beg super rich people around their programs. And that more than anything is the lifeline. I mean, there are coaches in high major leagues right now that have been begging to get into this event, and there's just not the room for them. And so, they're left to their own devices to continue to try and raise as much money as they can. And I'm talking like coaches in like the SEC and the Big Ten, like the two conferences that are standing to be the richest in the years to come. So yeah, this has been a major disruptor, and I still want to see how they can actually afford to wind up paying all these schools and keep a business model that is successful in the years to come. But 5-year plan it is, and it will be fascinating to see how this rolls out. Because if it is somehow successful, you have GP. I mean, if this goes to be 18 plus teams and 25 and beyond, like this is the premier event in the early part of the season. There's no denying it. They want to do group stage play a la FIBA World Cup and FIFA World Cup action, where you played, a couple of games and you'd move on to, a single elimination bracket play. Like there's a major vision here where if they come through on it, if they do, then yes, you'll have a sport changing event that gets introduced and becomes a mainstay on the calendar.
It's easy to understand why schools would want to be involved in this. You talked about at the power conference level, even the SEC and Big Ten, members of those conferences are trying to figure out how to get more NIL money. Based on conversations I've had with people, even within those leagues, there's big gaps between one school to the next. So like I had one coach in a power conference tell me that he's operating with an NIL budget of around 1.5 million, but he knows somebody else in his league has an NIL budget of around 5. Yeah. And Seth Greenberg was talking about all of this stuff on ESPN earlier in the week as it pertained to Dan Hurley remaining at UConn, and how can UConn continue to compete dollar for dollar going forward. And Seth said from conversations he's had with people, normal NIL budgets have gone just in a matter of a year or two from like $3 million to like $7 million. Like it's really been pushed pretty high pretty quickly. And so some of these schools aren't equipped, even the ones from the Big Ten and SEC, to have all this money to compete right now. And this is a way to increase that. So it's obvious for me why schools are lining up, as you say, to be involved in this. It is less obvious to me how it's going to be financially viable going forward. But like I said, I don't know why I or you should care about that. It reminds me a little bit of the conversations about Overtime Elite when it first became a thing and was throwing contracts at people. You would hear folks say, I don't understand how they're going to make the money back to cover all of this stuff. And then, somebody'd pop up and say, okay, but who cares if they're putting the contract in front of you and the checks are going to clear for now? Just if you want the money, take the money. And you let the people 4 years younger than you worry about whether it's going to be here in 4 years, but the money's here now. Take it if you want to. This feels a little bit like that. I can't predict the future, but it's pretty clear the money's here right now. So why not take it?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this thing can continue to go on, be planned without a hitch. There's still a few more bars to clear, and my understanding is some of the other big schools that are hoping and waiting to get in 25 and beyond, understandably so, they're going to wait until, and to be clear, like your Gonzagas, your Michigans, like they haven't signed, as I understand it, they haven't signed these like binding contracts that don't allow them to get out. Obviously, the event has to prove itself to be solvent and to be in existence for more than 1 year. But it's a biggie for sure, and it's captured the intrigue of a lot of people behind the scenes in college basketball. And so now we wait for the next steps to be cleared. But if it goes off without a hitch, man, that is that's a big time one. But if and when it gets played, just as a heads up, barring something changing in the 11th hour, I'm almost positive this will be only viewable on a streaming service that is yet to be determined.